Well, we are all well aware that this is the 4th of July holiday week, the second major holiday of our summer season, and without doubt, without doubt, the most popular of our summer holidays. And you can tell that there are already celebrations going on. Maybe in town last night you heard some booming and so forth of a city putting on some fireworks. And we have lots of visitors this morning. And so we hope that you have a very blessed 4th of July holiday. And we'll say a little bit about that in a moment, but I want to take you again back to the book of John. And we have been in the book of John now for a long time. And we have been in John chapter 12, and you may be thinking we'll never get out of John chapter 12, but we're about to get out of John chapter 12. I've reminded you over and over again of why John writes this book. And if you will go way back to a verse much earlier in John chapter 12, you'll find in John chapter 20, actually not John chapter 12, chapter 20, that he'll make a statement. I have written these things so that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Christ, the Anointed One. He is the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in His name. John really wants all people to believe in Jesus. And you might ask the question, why would that be? What would be the advantage of believing in Jesus? And we know that it changes the way one lives. It changes the way one thinks. It has something to do with our character. It has something to do with our truthfulness. It has something to do with our integrity. It has something to do with our morality. It affects everything we do in life. But the biggest thing it does is when he says that by believing we might have life in His name, we're talking about eternal life. And it wasn't but a few weeks ago in John chapter 12 that we took a moment away from John chapter 12 and we talked about what happens when a Christian does die. And Janet is understanding that lesson right now because this past week, Doris, her mother, Doris Evans, passed from this life. Most of us were expecting that. Doris has been coming here about 4 years. I think all 4 years it was on a cane or most of the time a walker. But she was so very pleasant. Do you remember that? How pleasant she was and how she would come out the back. You don't know this, how she would come out the back and she would talk to me about my lessons. Most of the time it was really positive. In fact, I think every single time. But what we know from that lesson is that the real Doris is already in paradise and she's already with loved ones who have gone before her and she's already in this wonderful place waiting for others to arrive, all because people believe in His name. And yet, I want to call your attention to one verse in John chapter 12, way down toward the bottom, verse 37. Now, we've had these previous 4 or 5 lessons out of the book of John, chapter 12. There are a lot of verses left where Jesus again says, I am the light. He again says, everything I'm saying because my Father told me to say it. If you have seen me, you have seen my Father. But here is one verse that I want you to look at. Verse 37. Even after Jesus had performed so many signs in their presence, they still would not believe in Him. Now, what do you think about that verse this morning? Even after He had performed so many signs in their presence. Now, we know from reading in the book of John How we have seen him take a man who has been paralyzed for 38 years, and now the man can walk again. We have seen a man blind from birth, and now he can see again. We have seen a man in the grave for 4 days, and he comes out alive again. But we don't even know, as you might say, the half of it. We might not even know the fraction of it. John says he did many other miracles right there before them. Let your mind wonder for a moment what that might have been like. How many knees do you think he fixed? How many shoulders do you think he fixed? How many cancers do you think he removed? All these signs over and over and over again, so that there is no doubt they're seeing something they've never seen before. They are seeing what we call miracles, and you have to remember that a miracle by definition is something that defies the laws of nature or the laws of science. Everybody, it's something that cannot happen normally. A miracle is when you make iron float, as they did in the Old Testament. A miracle is when you stop the earth from rotating for a moment so that it appears the sun stands still, as he did in the book of Joshua. A miracle is when he parts the waters of a sea, as he did in the book of Exodus. It defies everything that man could understand. That's why many brilliant people, truly brilliant people, have looked at all this and said the Bible cannot be true, because how can these things happen? And they happen because with God all things are possible. Those are the things they saw. And they still would not believe. What would be the reason for that? What would be the reason that people would still not believe? And there may be many reasons, but I know for sure of two. And the one is that people just love darkness more than they like light. You see, all this light stuff we're talking about, you believe by faith. What I just said about Doris, we believe by faith. I believe with all my heart that it's true. I believe it by faith. I believe with faith and without faith that living the life of a Christian is a better life. I think living a moral, honest life, a truth-filled life, is a better life. And yet it has always been that people like darkness more than they like light. John said that in the very beginning of his gospel, didn't he? The light came into this world, but the darkness could not comprehend it. And he's repeated something like that all the way through the book of John. And the other reason why people won't believe is, as we've seen in the Gospel of John, they just don't want to change. They just don't want to change. I've been doing this one thing, this one way all of my life. This is how I've always felt all of my life. I am not going to change. And so people, though they see so many miracles right there in front of them, they still don't believe. Do you find that amazing? Well, we shouldn't. It's always been that way. So I want to take you back to our nation. I am not a historian. I know very little about history. Somehow in those history classes, I didn't think they were all that valuable. I'm sorry, Greg. I'm sorry, Zonell. And I just kind of let them pass by. But it was true, it is true, I think, July the 4th, 1776, that our forefathers did sign a Declaration of Independence, and they were saying we would be independent from a foreign country or a foreign dictatorship, or however you want to say that. And they would later write a constitution that would guide our steps as a nation. And they brought forth upon this planet, in my opinion, the greatest nation ever to exist on this planet. Now, that is a debatable topic, and I am sure that there are people in other nations that might argue with me because they love their nation. But let me ask you, have you ever known a nation like this nation who has loved freedom so much and wanted people to truly be free in a variety of ways? Have you ever seen a nation occupy space on this planet that has been so compassionate and benevolent and generous as has been this nation? Have you ever seen a nation that carried with it high ideals, the high ideals of truthfulness, of integrity, and of morality? Have you ever seen a nation that so gave freedom to people to read the Bible the way they read the Bible and to put that, what they read, into practice? And that is, by the way, called faith. You read it the way you understand it, and you do what you think it said. That's what God requires. And over time, as you grow, you read it, and you may find you think it says something a little different, and your faith compels you to do it a little differently. That's what's called living by faith, too. And this nation made it free to do that. And all of this for one reason. Because those who signed the Declaration of Independence, those who would later put together a constitution, had one fundamental belief. And that was a belief in God, and that was a belief in Jesus Christ. And we are gathered this morning as recipients of all of that, because we got to live by God's grace in a nation like this. But if I did my math correctly, that was 247 years ago. That was 247 years ago. And things change with time. Everybody understand that? How many times have I told you the only thing I can remember from my course in thermodynamics with Dr. Gerald Parker, a dear, dear friend of mine who's no longer alive, an elder at the Memorial Church for a long time, that everything is moving to an increasing state of disorder, which is the second law of thermodynamics. Everything unravels. Has anything unraveled in these 247 years? Donnie just told me a little while ago, it seems like things are getting worse and worse. And Ronnie just prayed in his prayer, our opening prayer, about the state of this world that we're in. Do you notice it? Do you notice it changing? Do you notice it not quite fitting how you feel it should be? And this is not in any way a political lesson. And this is not in any way a judgmental lesson. This is a reality lesson that's going to come to a conclusion that's going to surprise everyone in this room. It will come to a conclusion that will be a surprise to everyone here. And the rate of change in this country is on a geometrical path. In mathematics, that means that the rate of change is increasing. It's getting faster all the time. And so, has truthfulness and the attitude for truthfulness changed? And of course it's changed. As the attitude toward human dignity and the value of human life changed. And of course it's changed. For the worse. Has morality changed? And how we feel about morality? And of course it has. And for the worse. And there seems to be an agenda with it. There are people who seem to have an agenda with it. And so we read of major corporations. And they seem to be buying into all this, wanting to change, and they push it and push it upon us. And that may be a big department store, or that may be a well-known clothing store, or that may be a beer company. And they push this change. Even our own government seems to push the change more and more. In Major League Sports, did I not read in the last couple of weeks about a Major League Baseball team in a pregame show? Had a group of drag queens dressed as nuns and call themselves the Sisters of Indulgence or the Sisters of Sin, and literally in a ballpark mocked Jesus, mocked God. And was I correct when I read last week that in a major city, a parade of drag queens, and they were chanting as they had this parade, "We are coming for your children. We are coming for your children," over and over. They don't care about me. They know an old guy like me is not going to change. But they want our university students, and they want our high school students and our middle school students, and they want all these right here. They want to normalize it so much. You remember how I've been telling you that I play 2 games on my phone? Both of them are kind of word games. Because I was told that if I play these word games, I can be mentally sharper. Some of you are thinking it's not worked too well. But I've actually gotten faster at those games. And in one of these games, my favorite one, once in a while it stops you and you have to listen to some kind of or watch some kind of advertisement, and it gives you these credits for doing it. And always, I've usually just set my phone aside while it's playing that little tiny, sometimes as long as 30-second thing, until the other night. Until the other night in Edmond, I'm playing this game, and I happen to watch what's going on. It's in 3 parts. I got to go through all 3 parts. I could hardly believe what I was seeing. It was talking about all this stuff I've just been mentioning as though it is real and it's important and I ought to be believing it. And after playing that game, and I don't remember how many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, it counts them for you, I deleted the game last week. I deleted the game. Because I said no more of it. But they don't care whether I delete it or not. They have a lot more people playing the game. And the problem in our country is back to the same problem it was when John was writing his gospel. People are not believing in God through Jesus Christ. They're just not. And so the question becomes for me, what do I want to do about it? What can I do about it this morning? I still love our nation. I still love the freedoms. I don't think for a long time they're going to stop us from assembling and talking. What can I do? And maybe at one time in my life, I thought we ought to get out and fight in some way. And maybe we ought to get on the street corners and hold up banners. And maybe we ought to. I don't think that anymore. I don't think that's the way we do it. Well, I appreciate it when people stop buying from certain groups because of what they promote. And I kind of like the fact that I deleted that game. But I want you to listen this morning to what Peter says about this problem when Peter was writing. That's a long time ago. So first of all, the first verse Burke will put up tells you what Peter says the world's like in his day. Above all, you must understand, in chapter 3 of 2 Peter, I think that's verse 3, above all, you must understand that in the last days, scoffers will come, scoffing and following their own evil desires. They just love darkness more than they love light. And have I not just described that very thing? They're scoffing. I don't know how many people watch the internet from this little church every Sunday or sometime during the week. And Burke is bold enough to put shorts on YouTube. And if I say just the wrong thing, he gets so many thumbs down or so many comments that are ugly. How many think I'll get today? How many think I'll get today? Because there are people who scoff and ridicule at what we do. Like these people who dress up like nuns in exaggerated ways and call themselves the Sisters of Indulgence, and they are scoffing. And God's going to come back someday through Jesus. He's going to send Jesus back someday. Janet, that's what we talked about when we talked about death of a Christian. One day he's going to come back. It's going to be a big surprise to a lot of people, by the way. In fact, all of us. If I kind of knew when he was coming, I could kind of clean some things up faster. Thankfully, by the grace of God, I don't have to clean up things so fast. Because if you walk in the light as he is in the light, he keeps on cleansing you of your sins. Isn't that great hope? Isn't that great confidence? I don't have to get everything exactly right. I just got to keep believing and walking by faith the best I can. But I tell you, he's coming, and he'll come when no one expects it. And the heavens will disappear with a roar, and the elements will be destroyed by fire, and the earth and everything in it will be laid bare. And since everything will be destroyed in this way, and because there are all these scoffers back in verse 3, and the world is falling apart in Peter's mind, I wonder what Peter would think if he saw it today. He probably would say, it's what I told you is going to happen. What kind of people ought you to be? Now, this is the big question. It's the question of the day. What kind of people should you be? You ought to live holy and godly lives as you look forward to the day of God and you want it to come quicker. You ought to live holy and godly lives. Our job right now is to stay put. Does that surprise you? Our job is to be kind and to never speak truth without grace. Our job is not to be harsh. Our job is to live as God's set-apart people. When you came out of the waters of baptism, you were set apart. You were a new creature. And you are to live a separate, set-apart or holy life. And God's going to see it. And God's going to honor it. I don't know whether I should say this or not, but I have thought of this hundreds of times over the last 20 plus years. One of my better friends in Lubbock was a medical doctor. He was an elder in a very large church. He used to say to me all the time, Ken, there's going to come a day in this country when things are so bad and Christians are in such a minority that we're going to need and want to lock arms with every person who calls on the Father through Jesus Christ, regardless of the name they have on the building, and stand firm. And just stand firm. And I think, could Al have been right? Dr. Al have been right all those years ago? Because Peter says, in the midst of all this mess, folks, it's not going to do you any good to go out there on the streets and scream about it. It's going to give people ammunition to talk more poorly about us. The strength is in standing firm and not wavering in your faith and living as God's holy people. And just being who we are supposed to be. That's the beauty of Christianity. Because I have a feeling that those people in Rome, even the earliest of times, those Christians, those followers of Jesus, who were being put in an arena and killed by wild animals, were not shouting towards Caesar saying, you're a fake and you're the wrong king and you're this and you're that. I have a feeling they stood there saying, God, we are yours and we will live holy lives. Does that make sense? Can you ever forget? Can you ever forget that image that we all saw a few years ago in a foreign country where they lined up people who said they were Christians and they were in orange suits and they were put on their knees with their hands, I suppose, tied behind their back, and they were kneeling, and the swordsman was there. If you're going to persist in this belief, we're going to cut off your head. And they cut off head after head after head of people who just stood firm and said, we belong to God. Have I surprised you this morning? I know the world's not what it used to be. The question is, are we who we're supposed to be? It's going to get worse. If God doesn't come soon, it's going to be worse. And I'm concerned about our children. Susan, my children. I'm concerned about our grandchildren. And I'm concerned about our grandchildren having children. Because of what they're going to experience. I'm more concerned about them learning how to stand firm in who they are as God's people. Strange lesson, isn't it? Different kind of lesson, I know. I haven't been political. I haven't been mean. I have said this is reality, and the reality is we're God's people. Through the grace of God through Jesus Christ, that was shown through Jesus Christ, we are His people, His kingdom people. And we'll be that no matter what.